Did God really tell us to hate our mothers and fathers and our sisters and brothers? Did God really hate Esau? And did God harden Pharaoh's heart to the point where Pharaoh had no choice but to resist God and not let the Jews go during the Exodus? Well, these things have caused many issues throughout Christian history, and people have wondered what was really going on in these situations. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about those. These are called idiomatic expressions. And if you're not familiar with them, I'll tell you what they are. An idiomatic expression in the Bible is a phrase whose meaning cannot be understood by translating the words literally. It reflects the culture, worldview, and everyday life of ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek speakers. In other words, the words say one thing, the meaning points to something deeper, and the culture supplies the missing bridge. These idioms are all over Scripture, and unless you understand them to be idioms, you run the risk of misunderstanding Scripture or thinking that the Scripture contradicts itself, which is a real problem that we want to avoid. There are countless idioms in Scriptures, and what I mentioned earlier, I will try to break down for you right now, because I think they're the most popular ones. The first one is where it says to hate your father and your mother. In Luke chapter 14, verse 26, it reads, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." Well, when you read this, it kind of seems like it's contradicting other scriptures in the Bible. For example, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, it says, "Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land your God is giving you." And then in Ephesians 5:25, it says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." In 1 John chapter 4, verse 20, it says, "Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen." Well, is Jesus contradicting the fifth commandment and what Paul and John said about and what John and Paul said about loving others? Because that's what it could seem like when you just read it at face value. The answer is no. In Hebrew and Aramaic, hate often means to love less, to choose second, to give allegiance. It's what's called a comparative loyalty idiom. It's not emotional hatred, which we often think that it is. And the meaning is better off saying it like this. Jesus is saying, your loyalty to me must be so great that by comparison, it looks like you hate your mother, father, wife, children, brothers, and sisters. That's really what it's saying. It's a comparison thing. So when we see these types of things, it's just like, you love your family, but you love God more. Because if God told you to do something and your family told you to do something, you're going to do what God told you to do. Doesn't mean that you hate your family. You just, hey, I love God more and he's a little bit more important than you guys are. That's basically what it's saying. The second one is when it says, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. In Romans chapter 9, verse 13, and also in Malachi 1, 2, and 3. But in Romans 9:13, it reads, just as it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. This is what is called a covenant election language, not emotional hatred. In Hebrew, love equals choose, to set apart, or elect. Hate equals pass over, give a lesser role, not choose. So what did Esau do wrong? Well, in Genesis chapter 25, verses 29 through 34, it says, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. That is why he was also called Edom. Jacob replied, first sell me your birthright. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is a birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore on oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, and then he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. It says he despised his birthright, which meant that he felt it was worthless, so much so that he sold it for a bowl of stew. He was so hungry, acting like he was going to starve to death. You know, we all exaggerate how we feel about something. Oh, I'm going to starve to death if I don't eat something right now, which really isn't the question. You're just exaggerating it so you can get something in your belly. But The meaning of the idiomatic expression is this: God is saying he chose Jacob's line for the covenant instead of Esau's because of how Esau treated his birthright. This is about God's purposes, not his affection. That's what we need to see in this. God is speaking about nations, not personal feelings towards the twins, because Esau and Jacob were twins. Jacob is Israel and Esau is Edom. The two nations will be rivals throughout history. It's important to note that God did bless Esau. So when we see that he hated Esau, well, if you hate him in the sense of the traditional emotional sense of Esau, why would God do these things like blessing Esau? God gave Esau land. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 5, it says, "Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I have given Esau the hill country of Seir as his own." And then God also prospered Esau. We see in Genesis chapter 33, verse 9, it reads, "But Esau said, I already have plenty. My brother, keep what you have for yourself." And then finally, we see where God protected the descendants of Esau. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 7, it reads, do not despise an Edomite, for the Edomites are related to you. Do not despise an Egyptian, because you resided as foreigners in their country. Edomites are the descendants of Esau because of the color red. That's where this comes from. So we see here that God gave Esau land, God prospered him, and God protected his descendants. So that obviously isn't something that shows that he actually hated him in an emotional sense where he didn't want anything to do with him. Then we come to the third thing, where it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. This subject has been used in a way to support the idea that mankind doesn't have free will, that God just, like chess pieces, maneuvers us into all these positions for his own pleasure. And many believe God overrode Pharaoh's will to force him to harden his heart towards God when God was trying to remove the Jewish slaves from Egypt. In Exodus chapter 7, verses 3 and 4, it reads, "But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites." Well, what the idiom here is that the Hebrew thought is an action can be attributed to God even when God permits it, God strengthens someone in the direction they already chose, or God withdraws restraint. Regarding Pharaoh, basically this is a case of God strengthening Pharaoh in the direction he already chose to go into. Basically, to harden means to show stubbornness. So Pharaoh was stubborn towards God because if you read further, Pharaoh repeatedly softens his heart and then hardens it again, which means that he has free will to choose what he is doing. It's not that God just made him do it, where Pharaoh did not have any choice. So that's what it says about, he is stubborn, and God is just playing into that stubbornness, almost picking a fight with him to reveal how stubborn Pharaoh is. So like I said, Pharaoh repeatedly softens and hardens his heart. If we look at the plague of frogs, and to start off with, in Exodus chapter 8, verse 8, it says, "Pharaoh summoned Moses, and Aaron said, 'Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord.'" And then in Exodus 15, a few verses later, it says, "But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said." So here we see that when the frogs were plaguing Egypt, Pharaoh was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll let your people go." But then relief came and he was feeling better. His stubbornness returned and he was like, no, I'm not going to listen to Moses and Aaron any further. Then God sends flies later on. And in Exodus chapter 8, verse 25, it says, "Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, 'Go, sacrifice to your God here in the land.'" And in Exodus 8:28, just a few verses later, it says, "Pharaoh said, 'I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but you must not go very far. Now pray for me.'" So Pharaoh relented and said you could that he would let the people go. But then he kind of hedged his bets a little bit. Said, "I'll let you go, but you can only go so far." So is God doing this too? No, this is Pharaoh kind of realizing that, he's up against something he's never seen before. So he's acquiescing, but he's like, I'm really not fully ready to get rid of my power. So you can only go so far to pray and everything like that. And also he asked for prayer. But then in Exodus 8:32, it says, but this time also Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go. So within 7 verses, Exodus 8:25, Exodus 8:28, Exodus 8:32, you see Pharaoh go from I will let the people go to I will let them go, but only so far, to I am not letting them go. This is proof of Pharaoh hardening his heart of his own volition. This is not God taking his ability to choose away from him. It is just God's presence in Pharaoh's life causing Pharaoh to harden his heart, because Pharaoh in many ways was a god, and here is the true God challenging in him, and his pride and his arrogance is preventing him from fully acquiescing to realizing that God is God. So this wasn't about God overriding Pharaoh's will to give himself the opportunity to show his power. It is about God's challenge to Pharaoh's authority revealing the stubbornness of Pharaoh's heart. That's what this is about. So these are the things we have to look at, that these idioms that we talk about when we say hate and God hardened somebody and all this falls into the idea that God, if he's doing all this, is a God of stone. He's just a God that micromanages everybody and doesn't allow anything to happen without him doing it. All these type of things is just not true. These are idioms that are used to explain a greater subject. That's what this is all about. So in conclusion, it's basically this. Biblical idioms aren't about cruelty. They're about loyalty, choice, and direction. Hate means to love less. Harden means confirm a path already chosen. When we read scripture with ancient eyes, God's character becomes clear, and so does the call on our hearts. Now, there are many idioms within the scriptures, and I hope what I've talked about today will give you shed some light on how you can look at these. So when you see things about God hating somebody or God hardening a heart, things of that nature, think twice about them so you can look into them and see, though, maybe there's something in the text that I'm not understanding, and ask God to reveal that to you, and he'll open your eyes and you will understand what the true meaning of his word is. I hope that helped you out. Have a good day.